I want you to think back to where you were 5, 10, 15 years ago. What did you want? And how has that changed? And did any of those carefully crafted plans involve you being here today? Not just here at this event or here at this university, but here, where you are in life right now. For some of you, that answer is going to be an absolute yes. For me, it was definitely not. Growing up, I never envisioned I could be in a place like this or on a stage like this. I fully intended to drop out of high school and instead ended up at UC Berkeley. So if you want proof that life does not work the way you think it will, there's that. But I think overall, things rarely, if ever, go according to plan. And I'm here to tell you why that's okay. So let me take you back. 15 years ago, I was boarding a flight to India for the first time. I was thrilled because I wanted to be a pilot. That was my grand plan. I was also a stubborn kid, so after an hour of hearing me ask if I could meet the pilots, at the 45th time, I think the flight attendant got the hint and asked if maybe I'd like to do that. And so I was over the moon. I went and said hello. But in my mind, being a pilot started right then. This was the interview. So not only did I say hello, I gave them my full government name, my date of birth, my favorite color, my first grade teacher's name in case they wanted any references. It was a little bit extra. And as life does, life happens. And a week later, I got my first pair of glasses, which is what happens when you read in the car and under the covers and in the bathroom and pretty much everywhere else. So my dream of being a pilot ended. The reading habit and the glasses stuck. So fast forward 5 years to 5th grade. I'm now a precocious 10-year-old. I had a bowl cut, which was a look. So between that and the round frame glasses, I was really putting together an aesthetic that was equal parts Harry Potter meets painfully awkward brown boy. This was around the time that I realized that my brain was starting to work a little bit differently. And sometimes that was really cool. I would remember pictures and images or snippets of words and be able to spell them, and they would be tricky ones, like ameliorate or convalescence, and I would have seen them in a book or on a billboard, or probably in a book. I've never seen a billboard use ameliorate. But so that was interesting. That led me to conclude that I was never going to study for a spelling test again, which set the stage for a vicious procrastination habit I have never really been able to break. It worked well because at the time my new plan was to be a writer. I'm terrible with deadlines, spend more time talking, in my books than talking to real human beings. So it seemed to work well. But there were less ideal changes too. Organization became a nightmare. My backpack very quickly became a black hole into which homework, report cards, tests went in, some magic happened, and then excuses came out. At home, despite my best efforts to be productive, I would spend 4.5 hours zoning out and zone back in, realizing that I was reading about Greco-Roman architecture, which, no offense to any architecture majors in the audience, but I've never used in my life. And this set a pretty repetitive common theme. I would show up, do well on some tests, lose literally all of my work, have a very stern parent-teacher conference, promise to be better, and nothing would really change. So let's jump up the timeline again. It's 8th grade. At this point, things weren't great at home. Mom and I were fighting every day, as 13-year-olds and their mothers do. I think what is less common is running away from home and coming home to find truancy officers on the couch. That's not really part of the plan. In school, things were equally interesting. I, supposedly the budding writer, failed my first class that year. What class? English. 8th grade was when I realized that for the first time, if I told half-decent jokes, people might like me. I realized this because I was being really, really severely bullied at the time. So for any stand-up comics or stand-up comics to be in the audience, they tell you, jump in, feet first, face first, into comedy, just do it. So for me, jumping in was telling a joke to the very large young man threatening to give me a swirly. For those of you who do not know what a swirly is, you are blessed. It is a very personal, intimate introduction to your school's plumbing system. So, I found my comedic voice and narrowly avoided finding myself face first in a toilet. And I loved it, the comedy, not the toilet. But yeah, between my latest, so that became the new plan, the new goal was to be a stand-up comic. And between, those career aspirations and my failing report cards, you can imagine that my mom was thrilled. 8th grade was the first year she threatened to ship me off to India to live with my dad, which, as you will soon come to discover, really does happen. That's not just a threat. But at the time, it felt a little excessive, so I got my newfound friends to tape together some A3 size sheets of paper and scrawl, "Please don't make Tushar move." Came home and I was like, "Take that, Mom." So I got off easy that year. And a couple years later, so sophomore year of high school, which is really when any semblance of a plan fell apart. School somehow had managed to still yet get worse. I was struggling to pass any of my classes. When I went, when I didn't, I divided my time between in-school suspension, in-school detention, and Saturday school. And the remainder of my time I spent doing something I really loved. I spent my time playing music. I was playing piano every day in the school, often at times when I was supposed to be in the class. And that became my escape. Music became my escape. I stopped taking the bus home to stay 2 hours every day with a best friend and practice. The Juilliard School became my new pipe dream. Unfortunately, along the way, I ended up failing all my classes, which will throw a wrench in things. So one day I woke up to find my dad at the door. He lives overseas in India. So that was when I knew I was in trouble. But I was expecting, you're grounded, get it together, it's time. It turns out that parents do not fly 7,000 miles across the world to ground you. So we went out to coffee, went out to Caribou, and we were all just sitting there, and everybody was being painfully silent and painfully nice. And so finally I asked, what's the deal here? And so in response, my dad pulled out an itinerary, put it on the table, and just slid it. It was really smooth. Just slid it across the table. And they were just like, "You're going." So let me tell you, I've never been back to Caribou since. But that was the plan when I was going. And when I left the country, the highest grade I had, this is not an exaggeration, the highest grade I had was a D- in Spanish 2 and 10 Fs. I can't make that up. And so I needed to go. For so many reasons, I needed to go. And I often ask myself, why? How did it get to this? How did this happen? And part of it, I would later come to learn, is that I was expressing early-stage markers for ADHD, an inability to stay focused, a tendency to hyperfocus, often on bridges, inability to sit still, an organizational nightmare. A lot of it made sense. A lot of it made a lot more sense. But I don't think that was all of it. For my psych majors in the crowd, you'll be familiar with the concept of cognitive dissonance. It's the idea that when you're faced with a set of circumstances that make you uncomfortable, you can do a couple of things. You can deny them outright, you can change your beliefs and expectations, or you can change your circumstances. And I felt a sense of helplessness at my failures, and the fact that I thought I couldn't change them. So I got comfortable. I rationalized. I said I didn't really care. I justified it. There's an Aesop's parable, I believe. It's a fox that's trying to eat a bunch of grapes on a grapevine. I'm not entirely sure why Aesop's parables include a vegan fox, but we'll let that slide. So the fox is trying to get the grapes. They're way too high, and so it convinces itself it's not worth it. I don't need it. They're probably sour anyway. And I think people are like that. We are dangerously good at talking ourselves out of the things that we want and the things that we deserve. And that is one of the single most dangerous ways to kill your dreams. You say, I don't want this, I don't need this, I can't ask for this, and it works. And so that's what I did. And then I got to India. India was a clean slate in every sense of the word. Literally, it was a new continent, a new country, a new city, a new school, a new family, a new home. So that's about the freshest start you get. Let's see, the school, they had just opened and they desperately needed students. So their big pitch to me was, look, it's going to be you and all girls in the grade. So I was sold. What they did not tell me was that the entire grade was going to be 9 kids. So I came from a class of 900, and I got there, and I was like, well, where's the rest of the grade? And they said, well, welcome, this is the rest of the grade. I said, oh, so that was a change. And if you ever want an example of creative chaos, cross the street in New Delhi. You will see diversity and disparity and insanity in 2 lanes. You will see people being chauffeured to and from private schools in Bentleys. You will see vehicles that are definitely not legal to be on the road. You will hear curse words in 10 different languages. You will see that traffic rules and pedestrians' rights are guidelines. But despite this seemingly insane system, it works. India worked for me. And I think it's so much more than this Nat Geo, Slumdog Millionaire, exotic world. It is really much deeper than that and much more meaningful. And for me, it was a fresh lease on life. I got a chance to reconnect with my father and my family. I got a chance to travel the country I was born in and see the Himalayas and the Taj Mahal. I got a chance to hear the Dalai Lama speak. And I think for the first time in years, I enjoyed going to school again. I found teachers and mentors and educators who changed the way I looked at subjects and the way I looked at school. And I found that in the process of all this, I dropped this need, this facade, this cynical, I'm an edgy teen, and I just liked it. I enjoyed it again. And so when the end-of-term examinations came around for the first time in half a decade, I was the top of my class. And I remember getting that call and running around the house screaming at the top of my lungs out of joy and nothing else. But and everyone was looking at me like, are you really all right? But I think success is like that. It is exhilarating. It is addictive. It will keep you coming back time and again. And so a couple years later, I did it again. And then I thought about, seriously for the first time, applying to school, applying to college. So I did. The first school to reject me was this one. And eventually, I ended up getting into Berkeley, which was surreal for me. You have to understand, a few years ago, I was planning to drop out. And to go from that to this kind of success, this top of the class, just going to Cal, was life-changing. It felt unbelievable. And so my first few years in California were a dream. There was a new plan. I was working in a legal clinic. I was getting ready to run for student government. I was checking all these neat little boxes in my plan to go be a star lawyer. And things were great, until they weren't. Clinical depression has a few key warning signs. If you find that you are missing calls from your friends and family, if you find that you're sleeping for 35 hours at a stretch, if you find that you are drunk before 11 a.m. on a Monday morning and it's not on official weekend, think about it. And so for me, I realized it was at a friend's birthday party. She had just turned 21. It was at her apartment, and she put up signs, go left for shots, go right for beers, go straight to find out what's in the jungle juice. And I think in that moment, I realized I would rather just go home and die instead. And that was a year ago. And in a year, I've taken a much-needed gap, a much-needed time off. I have opened up to my friends and family about what's been going on and gotten better, which is a daily process. I found new ways to learn and think and grow and give back. I have worked retail, which has taught me that I really don't know how to fold clothes as well as I would like. I've gotten the chance to write and get paid for it. I think most importantly and most meaningful has been the chance to work with students who are a lot like me, students who have ADHD, who have comorbid conditions, who are struggling in many of the same ways that I did. And so I've seen a lot of backpacks that look like black holes and a lot of transcripts with F's on them. But it has been empowering, the chance to help people take control of their education and not be a victim to their circumstances. And so today I'm getting ready to go back to school and graduate. But despite all of this, despite having this neat, cute little plan, there's one thing we've learned: plans change. You can make plan after plan after plan, and life will still happen. So what then? I don't think it stops at, oh no, life happens. What do we do? There's a point in every system. It's known as the edge of chaos. It is the point between total order and total disorder, between complete chaos and neurotically planned existence. And don't get me wrong, planning is a life skill. It's just, look, in every group, there's one friend who is excessive on planning. You knew every class you were taking 2 years before you got into college. If you cannot think of someone, it's because it's you. I think equally important is accepting that plans change. And so the edge of chaos, there's this idea that right in the middle of chaos and order, pretty cool things happen. Systems produce their most reactive and productive outputs. Organisms adapt to be at their most productive. And again, people are like that. There's a point where you find a balance. between internal, external chaos, between all of the plans and all of the plans that haven't worked out. And at that point, great things happen. You are capable of creative, dynamic change. And you owe it to yourself to go and find it. Now, as with anything that matters, that's easier said than done. It can be a little hard to see the beauty in chaos theory when you're broke, when you're behind on rent, when you're behind in your classes, when you can't get access to healthcare, when you can't get access to advisors. That's very real. That's an issue that cannot be denied, and to do so, I think, would be disingenuous. But I think despite that struggle, it can be done, and you should do it. And I'm not here to pitch a self-help guide or sell my next 5-step program. I mean, I think the point is that it's doable. And the commonality is it's a lot of introspection, a lot of self-discovery, and a ton of support. And in that regard, I've been phenomenally lucky. I've always had people in my corner from day one, whether they are parents, whether they are friends, whether they are mentors, whether they are peers. People have put faith in me before I've been willing to put faith in myself. And that has made a world of difference. But I realized that that's why I'm on this stage. That's why I'm around. That's why I'm alive. And not everyone is that lucky. Not everyone has that level of support. Some people are disenfranchised or discriminated against. And some people just lack that level of support that I've been so privileged to have. And I think today, I have a decent pair of dimples and a microphone and a stage. That's it. I have a platform. And I think with that, all I want to say is this. Wherever you are on this spectrum of balance, of chaos, of finding yourself and losing yourself, if you can be a support to someone, a friend, a colleague, a peer, do it. It'll make a world of difference. Do it without a doubt. And I think in doing so, you empower both yourself and the people around you to embrace this chaos that is inherent to life, the fact that plans change, the fact that life happens. And in doing so, that gives you the power to find your own sense of balance and meaning. Thank you.